The pan lay open under the sun. From a distance, it still looked right. A wide, shallow depression cupped gently by low grass and acacia scrub, its surface pale and smooth where water had once settled and held. In other seasons, it reflected sky. In this one, it reflected only heat. The elephant reached it late. Not by error, but by necessity. The route had been longer this year, movement slowed by heat and distance, by calves that could not be rushed, and by elders that would not be. The herd had followed memory as far as memory still worked. The pan should have been soft, it was not. The elephant stepped forward and felt resistance where there should have been give. The ground held, cracked, hardened, unyielding. Old mud lay exposed, its surface broken into plates that cut at the edges and pressed back against weight instead of absorbing it. Already dry. He paused. The smell confirmed what touch had already told him. No moisture lingered beneath the crust. No coolness rose when the surface broke. The pan had not dried recently. It had been empty long enough to forget what it once held. Behind him, the herd gathered at the edge. Dust clung to their legs and bellies, marking distance travelled. Their movements slowed instinctively, the expectation of relief collapsing into recalculation. Calves shuffled closer to adults, sensing the shift without understanding it. The elephant lowered his trunk and touched the ground again. Nothing. He scraped once, gently, peeling back a layer of hardened mud. Beneath it lay more of the same, lighter in colour, just as dry, offering no resistance that mattered. This was dangerous. Dry pans were traps of a different kind. They promised water by shape alone, drawing animals inward before revealing absence. Leaving them cost energy that had already been spent to arrive. The elephant lifted his head and listened. No insects gathered. No birds worked the edges. No smell of damp earth carried on air. Even the wind, faint and inconsistent, brought nothing useful. The pan was dead. The elephant moved farther in, slow and deliberate, testing ground at intervals where water sometimes lingered longest. His weight pressed down without response. The mud did not deform, it cracked and stayed cracked. This pan had failed early. Earlier than memory accounted for. He stopped near the centre and stood still, massive body casting a shadow that offered no relief. Heat rose from the ground in visible shimmer, bending distance and flattening depth. Behind him, the herd waited. No one called. Sound carried poorly here, pressed flat by heat and open space. Decisions would not be announced loudly. They would be made by movement, or by the lack of it. The elephant turned slowly in place, scanning the pan's perimeter. Old tracks crossed it. Antelope, zebra, even other elephants, all light and shallow, all angled away. No sign of recent digging, no churned mud. No broken crust where desperation had found something worth uncovering. They had all come. They had all left. The elephant exhaled slowly. A deep sound felt more than heard. His trunk hung still, conserving motion. Reaching the pan had cost the herd time and strength. Leaving it would cost more, but staying would cost everything. The elephant shifted his weight and turned toward the far edge, not yet moving, just aligning body with direction. This was not retreat, it was reassessment. The mud was already dry, and standing at the centre of a place that still looked like water but no longer behaved like it, the elephant understood that this season would not punish those who moved too early, but those who trusted memory longer than the land allowed. The herd waited for his next step, and the pan, wide and empty, offered nothing back. The elephant did not turn immediately. He stood where he was, letting the heat press against his skin while his body recalibrated. Movement without purpose wasted energy. Standing still, even under sun, cost less than walking without direction. Behind him, the herd shifted, not forward, sideways. Adults adjusted position to shade calves briefly, then moved again when the shade slid uselessly across the cracked ground. The pan offered no structure to hide behind, no edge that softened exposure. Everything lay open. The elephant stepped once, then stopped. The sound was wrong. His foot landed with a dry, brittle crack instead of the dull compression that signaled mud-holding moisture below. The vibration travelled outward across the pan's surface, sharp and quick, disappearing without depth. This ground would not be dug. Digging required yield. Yield led to seepage. Here, effort would fracture surface without reward. The elephant angled his body toward the perimeter and began to walk. Slowly. Each step pressed weight into hardened mud that resisted, transferring shock upward through bone and joint rather than absorbing it. Over distance, this mattered. Hard ground punished repetition. The herd followed. Spacing widened as individuals adjusted pace to avoid stepping directly into the cracks opened by those ahead. Calves placed feet carefully, guided by adults who slowed further to match them. No one rushed. Rushing on dry pans caused injury. They reached the edge. Grass there was sparse and brittle, cropped short by others who had arrived earlier. The soil beneath was dusty and loose, offering little nutrition and no moisture. Even the acacias nearby showed stress, leaves small, curled inward, conserving what little they retained. The elephant stopped again. This pause was different. It carried consequence. Leaving the pan meant committing to distance without guarantee. The next known water lay far enough away that calves would struggle. Waiting here offered no benefit, but it delayed the inevitable cost of departure. The elephant lifted his trunk and drew in air deeply. Smell arrived faintly. Not water. Dung. Old. Many animals had passed through recently, following the same expectation, leaving the same way. Their scent trails overlapped and tangled, pointing outward in multiple directions without preference. This pan no longer decided routes. It only absorbed them. A low rumble passed through the elephant's chest. Not a call, but a vibration of tension released. The herd responded subtly, shifting weight, tightening formation. He turned decisively now. Not back the way they came. That route had already been stripped. Instead, he chose a line that cut across memory, angled toward higher ground where rock sometimes trapped shade and small seeps lingered longer. The first steps away from the pan felt heavier than those toward it. Fatigue accumulated without relief. Dust rose around legs and settled quickly, coating skin and hair, increasing heat retention. Calves stumbled once or twice, corrected immediately by adults who closed ranks to steady them. The pan fell behind, not quickly. Its flat surface stretched deceptively, making distance feel shorter than it was. Only when the cracked mud gave way fully to grass and stone did its pull weaken. The elephant did not look back. He did not need to. The pan had already declared itself. The mud was already dry. And as the herd moved on, carrying the cost of a destination that had failed before they arrived, the elephant understood that this journey would now be measured not by where water waited, but by how much strength remained when the next decision could no longer be delayed. The land tightened around them. Not physically, there were no walls, no sudden rises, but functionally. Options narrowed as the herd moved farther from the pan, leaving behind a known absence and entering uncertainty that demanded commitment. The elephant set the pace. Slower than before. Not because strength had failed, but because recovery no longer followed effort quickly enough. Each stop took longer to restore breathing. Each restart felt heavier than the last. The ground climbed gently. Rock appeared more often now, scattered among grass bleached nearly white. Shade existed in fragments, brief narrow strips beneath thorn trees that barely altered temperature. The elephant used them anyway, positioning calves first, then adults, rotating bodies so no one stood exposed too long. This cost time, but it preserved bodies. Ahead, the smell changed. Faint at first, then clearer, dung layered thickly, fresh enough to matter. Another herd had passed through recently, not elephants. Buffalo. Many. They moved fast when water was near and faster when it was not. Their presence meant competition ahead, water that might already be under pressure, fouled, or guarded. The elephant slowed further. Buffalo did not share water easily. They churned edges into mud quickly, making access difficult for calves. They also drew predators that followed them for different reasons. The elephant lifted his head and listened. Wind carried sound poorly, but it carried vibration. Hooves had passed here recently. The ground still held their compression. Time lag was short. The herd closed ranks instinctively. Calves moved inward. Adults shifted outward, bodies forming a loose barrier that did not signal aggression, only cohesion. They continued. Heat rose again as the day pushed forward. The sun climbed higher, flattening contrast and erasing depth. Distance became difficult to judge. What looked near remained far longer than expected. One calf stumbled, not badly, just enough. The elephant stopped immediately. Stopping mattered more than progress now. Injury ended everything. He waited while the calf regained footing, trunk touches brief and reassuring, then moved on only when balance returned. The smell of water arrived suddenly. Weak, thin, but unmistakable. It did not come from the ground. It came from ahead and slightly downslope, carried sideways by uneven air. That meant water was exposed, not pooled deep, but shallow enough to evaporate and announce itself. The elephant adjusted direction subtly. Not a sharp turn, just a gradual curve that brought the herd closer to the source without broadcasting urgency. As they crested a low rise, the water revealed itself. A shallow seep, barely more than a damp patch where rock trapped runoff beneath soil. Buffalo stood around it already, bodies dark and heavy, hooves sunk into mud that was still wet. For now, the elephant stopped. He did not approach, not yet. Buffalo crowded water aggressively. Entering now would mean confrontation, stress, risk of calves being pushed or separated. He waited at a distance, watching. Buffalo behavior revealed more than water level ever could. Their movement was tense, frequent. They did not linger long. Individuals drank quickly, then yielded space to others, cycling in and out. The water was failing. This was not a place to stay, but it was enough. The elephant moved, slowly, deliberately. He approached from downwind, keeping calves shielded behind adults. Buffalo noticed but did not challenge immediately. Size mattered here. At the edge, the elephant stopped again. He let others drink first. This was not submission, it was control. When the buffalo thinned slightly, he stepped forward and lowered his trunk, drawing water carefully, lifting it to his mouth in measured pulls. Calves followed, awkward and urgent, spilling some, wasting some, but enough reached them. The water dropped visibly. Mud churned. The seep weakened even as they used it. The elephant did not stay. He drank. He let calves drink. Then he turned away. This water would not last another hour. Staying would turn competition into conflict. The herd moved on again, carrying what little relief they had taken, knowing it would not sustain them long. Behind them, buffalo reclaimed the seep, churning it further toward failure. Ahead lay more distance, more uncertainty. But now time had been bought. Briefly, barely. The elephant led on, heavier with knowledge than with water, aware that this season would not offer generosity, only moments where restraint and timing prevented collapse. The pan was gone. The seep was already failing, and the journey continued, measured not in kilometers, but in how many such moments could still be found before even careful leadership could no longer keep weight, thirst, and time from converging all at once. The relief did not last. It never did. The water taken at the seep cooled throats and slowed breath, but it did not lighten bodies. Weight returned almost immediately, pressing down through legs already worn by distance and heat. The elephant felt it in his joints first, a deep, familiar resistance that did not mean injury, only accumulation. They moved on. not far. Just far enough to put space between themselves and the seep before competition turned into pressure. The ground levelled again, opening into scrub where grass grew thin and uneven, offering little food but enough texture to break the monotony of cracked earth. The elephant slowed the herd deliberately. Drinking had bought time, not strength. Muscles needed to rebalance, calves needed to settle before moving again. Pushing now would undo what little the water had given. They stopped beneath a cluster of thorn trees. Shade here was partial and fleeting, but it existed. The elephant positioned himself so his shadow covered two calves at once, then shifted slightly as the sun moved. Adults rotated through the shade without signal, an old pattern refined through many dry seasons. The herd rested, not lying down, standing, always ready to move again. The elephant listened. No sound of distant thunder, no birds gathering that suggested water nearby. The air remained dry and heavy, unwilling to carry promise. This was not a failed journey. It was an incomplete one. The pan had failed early. The seep would fail soon. Somewhere ahead, another source might still exist. Deeper, more protected, or simply less contested. Or it might not. The elephant did not imagine certainty. He imagined distance. That was enough. As the sun lowered, heat eased slightly. Not enough to restore strength, but enough to reduce loss. The herd began moving again, this time toward rising ground where rock fractured soil and sometimes trapped moisture longer than open plains allowed. Their pace was slow, measured, every step chosen. Behind them, the pan lay empty and unchanged, its cracked surface already erasing the memory of those who had crossed it. The seep would follow, churned and exhausted by nightfall. Ahead lay no guarantee, only continuation. The elephant led without urgency, but without hesitation. He did not look back. Places that failed once rarely corrected themselves within the same season. What mattered now was not where water had been, but where effort still produced forward movement without collapse. As night approached, the herd pressed on, silhouettes stretching long across pale ground, bodies heavy but intact. They carried no victory, no abundance, only the narrow success of having avoided being trapped by a place that still looked like water long after it had stopped being one. The mud had already been dry. The water, when found, had already been failing. But the herd still moved, and as long as movement remained possible, slow, costly, but deliberate, the elephant knew that survival did not depend on arriving where memory pointed, but on leaving early enough to keep strength aligned with time in a landscape that no longer waited for anyone to catch up.